Hi, I am Anna. I come from www.ntvforex.com. Euribor fixing below ECB deposit rate for the first time analysis http ntvforex.com news ID 2-38 D9 17 2020 10 14 37 AM EU mid-market update focus on BO decisive Euribor fixing below ECB deposit rate for the first time. Notes observations Eurozone OG CPI registered its first negative reading in 4 years with the core rate at a record low. ECB official continue to talk that FX is a variable in inflation outlook. Daily 3-month Euribor fixing at 0.501% for a record low and below ECB's deposit rate for first time. No surprises on the rate front in session. Indonesia, Taiwan keep policy steady. Asia BOJ left its policy unchanged as expected. Left interest rate on excess reserves IOER unchanged at 0.10% and maintained 10-year yield target at 0.00%. Reiterated stance that would not hesitate to take additional easing if needed. Raised its overall economic assessment that the domestic economy likely to follow an improving trend, but improvement would be only moderate. Uncertainties were extremely high over the impact of the virus. CPI to negative for the time being due to pandemic and energy prices. New Zealand Q2 GDP registered a record contraction in its first technical recession since 2010. QQ 12.2% v 12.5% EYY 12.4% 12.8% E2130 Australia OG employment change 111.0 K v 35.0 K unemployment rate 6.8% v 7.7% E Europe PM Johnson reached an agreement with Tory rebel MPs over Brexit law and would propose amendment to Internal Market Bill. Government agreed to compromise that gave the House of Commons an explicit vote on authorizing any breach of international law. America's FOMC left the target range unchanged between 0.000.25% as expected, to maintain low rates until job and inflation targets were met. 13 of 17 members saw no rate hike at least through 2023. Decision was 8-2 with members Kaplan and Kashkari dissenting. Fed Chair Powell post-rate decision press conference noted that its policy statement contained powerful forward guidance. Expected guidance offered today as net long-term TIC flows $10.8 billion v $113.0 billion prior. Total net TIC flows $88.7 billion v $67.8 billion prior. House Speaker Pelosi spoke with PSE Secretary Mnuchin about relief measures. Looking at a stopgap bill, U.S. presidential candidate Biden stated that any trade deal between the U.S. and UK must be contingent upon respect for the Good Friday Agreement and preventing the return of a hard border. Brazil Central Bank BCB left the Selic rate target unchanged at 2.00% as expected for its first in 13 meetings in the current easing cycle. Speakers fixed income FX commodities Euratom equities indices STOXX 6000.70% at 370.54, FTSE 0.68% at 6037.04. DAX 0.73% at 13,158.35, CAC 40 0.69% at 5,039.20, IBEX 35 0.70% at 7,061.00, FTSE MIB 1.00% at 19,764.50, SME 0.57% 10,492.69, S&P 500 Futures 1.12% market focal points. Key themes: European indices opened generally lower and moved into the red as the session progressed. Sectors leading to the upside include consumer discretionary and energy, technology and materials sectors among underperformers. Press speculation that UK might tighten coronavirus restrictions. Unibail announces share issue. Reportedly EU regulators opposed to Telecom Italia merger focus on upcoming BO rate decision. French FinMin insisted no plans to raise taxes. EU car registrations register 7th month of decline. No major equities events expected in the upcoming US session. Equities consumer discretionary next NXT.UK 2% earnings, Greenyard Green.BE 5% raises outlook, Delivery Hero DHER.DE 1.5% acquisition, Playtech PTEC.UK 6% Earnings Financials IG Group IGG.UK 7% Q1 Update Industrials Daimler DAI.DE 1% Europe Car Sales Telecom Italia TIT.IT 3% EU said to oppose merger of Italy's broadband networks Speakers ECBA de Windows Spain stated that the inflation outlook to determine policy not the euro. He reiterated Council view that economic recovery to be uneven and unequal. He also reiterated that pandemic bond buying fund PEP is flexible and can be extended if necessary. Reiterated view that ECB to react based upon inflation projection and that exchange rate was a fundamental economic variable. ECBA's REN Finland risked that inflation would continue to be too low but have averted the risk of deflation. FX is an important element on the inflation outlook ECB to allow temporary relief in banking sector leverage ratios. Exceptional circumstances justify leverage ratio relief. Germany Finmin-Schall's 2021 budget to contain new debt of A100B. France Finmin Mayor retaliated view of no plans to raise taxes. Domestic economy was moving in the right direction. Fitch affirmed Taiwan sovereign rating at AA outlook stable. BOJ Gov Kuroda post-rate decision press conference reiterated its stance that would not hesitate to add to easing if necessary and was closely watching the pandemic effects. Reiterated to continue efforts to achieve the 2% inflation target. It noted that price expectation I was weakening but optimistic that inflation would go back to positive territory. Reiterated its new overall assessment that the domestic economy had started to pick up but would only do so moderately. Exports and production were picking up but business investment was on declining trend. To keep supporting the funding of companies. BOJ to maintain close contact with government on policy had cooperated strongly with government. Reminder on September 16 Suga became PM and pledged to continue with Abenomics. To keep closely watching FX markets desirable for orderly price movements. Japan Chief Cabinet Secretary Kato stated that expected the BOJ to take the appropriate steps as necessary. Indonesia Central Bank by policy statement noted that the decision to keep policy steady was to help maintain IDR currency rupiah stability and support economic growth. To continue interventions for FX stability and extend easing of RRR until June 2021 for banking lending to small businesses. Taiwan Central Bank CBC policy statement reiterated that it would continue with an expansionary policy. Saw a mild inflation outlook with no signs of deflation and saw frequent flows increasing FX volatility. Currencies fixed income USD was holding onto its recent gains over the past 15 hours as the Fed's policy meeting was deemed to be less dovish than expected. Euro USD tested the 1.1740 before retracing the bulk of its losses. Session saw more ECB member note that the exchange rate was a variable in the inflation outlook. The Eurozone OG CPI was confirmed to register its first negative reading in 4 years with the core rate at a record low. The 1.15 area seen as key support now that 1.20 held in recent weeks. Focus on BO rate decision later today with GBP USD steady at 1.2970 area. MPC seen likely to vote unanimously to keep monetary policy unchanged as markets viewed BO had enough scope for current bond purchases to last until December. BO's stance likely to remain heavily skewed to the dovish side. USD JPY continued to stay below the 105 handle. Some risk aversion flows aiding the yen. Economic data NL Netherlands OG unemployment rate 4.6% v 4.5% prior. EU 27 OG new car registrations % prior. CH Swiss OG trade balance 3.6 billion Swiss francs v 3.3 b prior. Real exports 2.9% v 2.0% prior. Real imports 1.3% v 0.5% prior. Watch exports YY 11.9% v 16.8% prior. Spain Q2 labor costs YY 8.3% v 0.8% prior. At Austria OG CPI 0.2% v 0.2% prior. YY 1.4% v 1.7% prior. ID Indonesia Central Bank by left the 7-day reverse repo rate unchanged at 4.00% as expected. PL Poland OG employment 0.8% v 0.7% EYY 1.5% v 1.5% EPL Poland OG average gross wages 0.8% v 0.9% EYY 4.1% v 4.0% EIT Italy July total trade balance ABVA 6.2 B prior trade balance EU ABVA 1.6 B prior HK Hong Kong OG unemployment rate 6.1% v 6.3% ETW Taiwan Central Bank CBC left its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 1.125% as expected EU Eurozone OG final CPI YY 0.2% v 0.2% ECPI core YY 0.4% v 0.4% ECPI 0.4% v 0.4% EU Eurozone July construction output 0.2% v 5.1% prior YY 3.8% v 4.8%. Prior GR Greece Q2 unemployment rate 16.7% v 16.2% prior Cyprus OG CPI harmonized 0.8% v 0.2% prior YY 2.9% v 2.0% prior fixed income issuance ES Spain debt agency Tesoro sold total A 4.233 B versus A 4.05.0 B indicated range in 2023, 2027, 2041, and 2050 bonds sold A 675M in 0.00% April 2023 SPGB average yield 0.449% v 0.392% prior bid to cover 5.78x v 4.05x prior sold A 935M in 0.8% July 2027 SPGB average yield 0.040% v 0.021% prior bid to cover 3.43x v 1.22x prior sold A 1.09B in 4.70% July 2041. SPGB average yield 0.813% v 2.216% prior bid to cover 1.43x v 1.27x prior sold A 1.53B in 1.00% October 2050 SPGB average yield 1.091% v 1.205% prior bid to cover 1.25x v 1.42x prior FR France debt agency AFT sold total A 8.494B versus A 7.258.5B indicated range in 2023, 2026, and 2028 bonds sold A 2.696B in 0.00% February 2023 OAT average yield 0.64% v 0.56% prior bid to cover 2.98x v 3.02x prior June 18, 2020 sold A 3.80B in 0.50% May 2026 OAT average yield 0.53% v 0.37% prior bid to cover 1.92x v 2.40x prior October 17, 2019 sold A 1.998B in 0.75% May 2028 OAT average yield 0.40% v 0.25% prior bid to cover 2.76x v 1.97x prior SE Sweden sold total 1.0 billion Swedish kronor versus 1.0 billion Swedish kronor indicated in IL 2026 and 2032 bonds i.e. Ireland debt agency NTMA sold A 750M versus A 750M indicated in 6-month bills average yield 0.550% v 0.540% prior bid to cover 2.50x v 3.00x prior looking ahead 0530 WHO Hungary debt agency AKK to sell bonds 0530 i.e. Ireland debt agency NTMA to sell A 750M in 6-month bills 0550 FR France debt agency AFT to sell A 0.75 1.25B in inflation-linked 2026, 2030 and 2047 bonds ODI 0600 PT Portugal OG PPI no ESTV 0.2% prior YY no ESTV 5.5% prior 0600 RO Romania to sell RON 400M in 3.65% 2025 bonds average yield percent v 3.73% prior bid to cover XV 1.40x prior 0600 CZ Czech Republic to sell CZK 10 0.80B in 3-month bills. 0700 UK Bank of England BOR interest rate decision expected to leave interest rate unchanged at 0.10%, expected to maintain total asset purchase program apt at A745B. 0800 UK Daily Baltic Dry Bulk Index 0800 ZA South Africa Central Bank SARB interest rate decision. 0800 UK BoGov Bailey at Bond Conference. 0800 ZA South Africa Central Bank SARB interest rate decision expected to cut interest rates by 25 bps to 3.25%. 0830 US AUG housing starts 1.483 MV 1.496 M prior building permits 1.517 MV 1.483 M prior revised from 1.495 M. 0830 US September Philadelphia Fed Business Outlook 15.0 EV 17.2 prior. 0830 US Initial Jobless Claims 850K EV 884K prior. Continuing Claims 13.00 MV 13.385 M prior. 0830 CA Canada AUG ADP payroll estimates no ESTV 1.149 M prior. 0830 US weekly USDA net export sales. 0900 RU Russia gold and Forex reserve WE September 11 no ESTV $591.7 billion prior. 0900 EU ECBA S Muller Estonia UK BO postpones apt operation. 1030 US weekly EIA natural gas inventories. 1100 CO Colombia July trade balance $1.0 BV $0.4 billion prior. Total imports $3.7 BV $2.9 billion prior. 1200 CA Canada to sell 30-year bonds. 1300 US Treasury to sell 10-year tips. 1930 JP Japan AUG National CPI YY 0.2% EV 0.3% prior. CPIX Fresh Food Core YY 0.4% EV 0.0% prior. CPIX Fresh Food Energy Core YY 0.1% EV 0.4% prior. 2300 CN China to sell 50-year upsized government bond. 2300 CN China to sell 3-month bills. 2330 JP Japan to sell 3-month bills. Subscribe our channel to receive the news as soon as possible. Thank you for watching. If you want to read real-time news, text messages to MT5 Expert Advisors page at https://m.me mt5.expert.advisors.